folks in the audience? Yay! We like new folks. Science on Tap is a monthly science education program and outreach. We combine curiosity in the community to have important conversations. So thank you all for being here. I'm really excited about tonight's presentation. I had the privilege of hearing about the restoration efforts when Christina was raising money for them, so it's been a few years. So I was excited back then to see the changes and hear about it. I'm even more excited now to see the results and everything that went into it. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Christina.
Thank you, Jen. Good evening. So my name is Christina Hartlieb, and I am the Executive Director at the Harriet Beecher Stowe House. How many of you have been to the Harriet Beecher Stowe House before? Oh, excellent. How many of you have driven by it 1,000 billion times and said, I should really go in there? Yes. So we are located right on the corner of Martin Luther King and Gilbert Avenue, which means you probably have driven by it before. And now you have the opportunity, starting next week, to come back inside the house and see it in its restored format. So, I have to admit that when Jen asked me to do a presentation on Science on Tap, I was like, science? I'm not really a science person. Like, in high school and college, I only took the required number of science classes because I'm a history person. I took all history classes, right? So I'm like, what would I talk about? And she's like, well, talk about the science behind the restoration. I'm like, oh, all right, I could probably do that. So we're going to talk about the science behind the restoration. But I'm also going to throw some history in there because there's no way not to throw history in there as well. So, forensic historic restoration. And this is a new experiment, and I'm going to explain that a little bit as we go on. I have a whole bunch of slides. This is the only one with words on it. Trust me. But I am going to kind of go through this so we can see where we're going with our trajectory tonight. So, what is historic restoration? How is the Harriet Beecher Stowe House restoration different than a typical one? And then how does that forensic evidence play into the work completed? So we're going to be looking at kind of all of the forensic evidence for the initial research. And then as we continue through the slides, we're going to continue to see a lot of research that was continued to be done over the last, 7 years now. We're going to talk about what was done and why we didn't follow the recommendations in the Historic Structures Report. That's also important. And then this is about the science behind the restoration, and from paint sampling to ghost lines, and why the most important part of restoring a 190-year-old house is the area that gets covered up. So we're going to see those covered up things too. All right. So a few years ago, this is what the Harriet Beecher Stowe House would have looked like when you drove by. And some of you came inside, but most of you just drove by on Martin Luther King Drive. This is the Gilbert side of the house. And it was the big white house on the hill. It is no longer the big white house on the hill. Let's start with some research and evidence. So when there is a historic restoration done, the first thing that is done, if it's done properly, is called an HSR, or Historic Structures Report. It basically goes through all of the evidence of the house, all of the written history about the house, pulls out as many primary source documents, goes through and looks at all of the places within the house. They make cutouts in the floors and in the ceilings and in the walls to see what is underneath what you can see. They do that so that they can see how is this house put together and how do we significantly restore it to its original or to its period of significance. And when a historic structures report is done, they talk about the period of significance. Now, for the Harriet Beecher Stowe House, one would surmise that the period of significance is when Harriet's family lived there in the 1830s and 40s. The house was completed in 1833. The Beecher family lived there until 1851. Harriet herself, this was never her primary residence. This was her dad's house. But She did live there off and on for periods of time, and when she didn't live there after she got married, she lived right down the street. So she was in and out of the family home the whole time she lived in Cincinnati, and it's because of the years that she lived in Cincinnati that she learned the things that she was able to learn to be able to write Uncle Tom's Cabin, the most important anti-slavery book ever. So you would think that that would be the period of significance. However, what we have found through the research and looking at, the places that were still intact in many areas, we actually have 2 periods of significance. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. It said, this is just the conclusion from, okay, I lied, there's 2 slides of words, sorry. The conclusion says, in these ways, okay, so what it wanted to do basically was the restoration and maintenance work, added benefits to the community, Harriet Beecher Stowe can remain relevant. So restoration to the 1833 to 1851 period. So let's look at what that means. Let's see how big those are. Okay. So you see everything in the dark yellow. So first floor and basement, and then second floor and attic. Second floor and attic's on the next page? No. Oh, no, I see. Okay, they're all 4 there. Sorry. So everything in the dark yellow is the original part of the house. That was there when the Beechers lived there. So what the Historic Structures Report said was, rip off the part of the house that wasn't there when the Beechers were there. Okay. That's what a typical historic restoration would do. It would pick a single period of significance and follow the recommendations to restore it to that time period. However, do you see on the first floor and on the second floor, you can see a big square that is blue. That big square in blue, and if you're driving by now, it is actually white on the outside, whereas the big yellow section is yellow on the outside. It's not right. That's not the reason why it was painted yellow. But so the big square in blue was a later addition to the house. It was put on by a subsequent family named the Montforts, and it was added in 1908. So it's way past the Beecher time period. But in the 1930s and the 1940s, this house, the whole house, was an African-American boarding house called the Edgemont Inn. It was a tavern. It was a community gathering space. It was right in the heart of the Black business district of Walnut Hills. And so when the Historic Structures Report said, rip off that part of the house, we said, whoa, wait a minute. We can't erase the 20th century African-American history of a house just because it's not the original. So we need to create another period of significance. And so we did. We went through the stages to be able to, create this part of the house as a restoration of that Edgemont Inn period. So although the whole house served as the boarding house and tavern, we said, okay, in this new addition part, the part that wasn't there when the Beechers were there, we're going to make that area's period of significance 1935 to 1946. And so our National Register of Historic Places listing now designates both time periods. And we have a new plaque that designates both time periods. The stand got installed yesterday. I'm hoping that the actual plaque gets put on the stand tomorrow. But that's because our restoration whole project is wrapping up and we are reopening next Friday. All right, so this are some details from the Historic Structures Report. And so the kinds of things that they look at when they cut out walls and ceilings and floors is you can see there are 2 different types of brick. So the original house was a brick house. And in this case, there were two types of bricks. So they surmised that there was a door in this location or a window in this location. They cut out the layer of the wall so that they could see what was underneath the wall. And you see that straight line? That indicates that that was a door or window. It says that one, it doesn't say which one it was. I don't remember exactly which one it is. But that was either a door or a window. And you can see the stuff on the right would have been the original, and the stuff on the left would have been an infill later when they decided that they didn't want that opening and they made it into a wall. Also, when you look at things like doors, who keeps old doors? Well, apparently the Montforts did. And so when they went searching through the basement, they found a lot of original doors, including like these 8-foot tall doors that go between the parlor and the dining room. Those have been restored. You're going to see them later. Different types of locks. They're looking at all of the different types of old things that they can see and figure out how was this used, what type of materials did they have, etc. On the left, because we're a historic site, and because we were associated with abolitionists, for many years during the 20th century, people swore that they went down into the basement and saw the tunnels. My husband and I play a drinking game. Whenever there is a documentary that's like, oh, and here are the tunnels, especially like with Nazi documentaries, here's the tunnels, drink, because there's no tunnels, seriously. But if you look at that picture on the left, can you see why someone might think that that used to be an 1800s tunnel? Potentially. That's actually just the opening to the crawl space, because most of the basement is a full basement, but under the front rooms, it's just a crawl space, and that's the entrance to the crawl space. So those are things that, you look at through a historic structures report as well. We see here there is, they take off the jambs of doors to see where the door actually ended or not ended and so forth. And then, again, cutouts in the walls to be able to see what was underneath and where things were in relationship to others. They surmise where a window might have been, and then they cut the wall open to see if that's where it was. At the end of the historic structures report, and this is just floor 1, they had a list of, these are all the things that continue to be need to be researched still. Now notice they didn't put anything in the square part to research because they assumed that we were going to tear that part off the house. Well, we didn't. But we did continue to do a lot of research in various sections. So one thing that you can see here is some research on underneath the front porch. You pull up the floorboards of the front porch, and you start looking underneath to see how the foundation really is. That is how we figured out that part of the foundation was only 18 inches deep in just stone. So there's been a lot of settling over time, and because of that, a lot of cracks in the walls, some very large ones. This one actually, again, it shows how deep the layers are. So the original structure was a brick building, and those outside walls were 3 bricks deep. Again, some joints where you can see the difference between the original brick and infill. This is how they determined where a lot of the, how the structure was initially. You can also see, where it looked like there were windows infilled on the outside. We also did some ground penetrating radar, which confirmed that there were no tunnels. It also, the thing that it did, though, is, we were looking for what is the treasure trove of an 1800s house? What do you really want to find? The privy, yes. You want to find the outhouse. Why? Because that's where everybody throws away their stuff, and therefore you get a lot of artifacts if you can find the outhouse. We did not find the outhouse, unfortunately, but there was a carriage house or, barn. It's underneath our parking lot. All right, so the Historic Structures Report was done in 2017. They continued to do some research, made a plan. We convinced, and by we, I mean the Friends of Harriet Beecher Stowe House. I should have mentioned that at the beginning. So the Ohio History Connection owns the house. The Friends of Harriet Beecher Stowe runs the house for them on a local level. OHC has 50-some properties around the state. They can't manage all of them directly, so they contract with local nonprofits. So it's really the two groups that are managing this restoration project together. Ohio History Connection has a restoration specialist and an architect and a historic carpenter and so forth. So they're doing the most planning, and I'm just kind of like coordinating on site and figuring out how we need to accommodate people and make sure that the contractors who need to be there at 7 a.m. have a way to get in. It's usually not me, but so that's really what's going on in terms of that. Hang on. It's not advancing. What am I going to do?
Push the button. Push the arrow. It's advancing on her screen, but not over here. It moved on your screen, but didn't.
Yeah, it's moving on my screen, but it's not moving on the... Do I need to unplug and plug back in? Yes?
Have you tried to turn this?
Should I unplug and plug back in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, something happened.
Something happened.
Something happened again.
Okay, so did you see the date? Construction begins February 2020. Oh, everybody's laughing. Okay, so the very first thing that we did was, because the front door had been the main entrance, and because it wasn't going to be the main entrance anymore because we were going to take off the porch, because the porch was not original to the Beecher era, and that part was being restored to Beecher era, therefore, we changed the visitor entrance to the side. But in order to do that, we needed to have an accessible ramp. So the first thing they did was build an accessible ramp in February 2020. Then there's the ramp building, more ramp building. They also, very important part, I know this picture looks like, this is not a very important picture. This is the most important picture, because what are these guys doing? They are shoring up that 18-inch foundation that is made of stone. So that is the that is the southwest corner of the house, which had sunk the most. And they are like drilling down, putting conical helix things. See, I don't know science, so conical helix things down in there and like boosting it up to the bedrock. So they like drilled down 30 feet, etc. But that is what they are doing right there. So we got a couple of those pictures. Again, it's not very pretty to look at. You don't see it now because it's all covered up, but that was the first important step. We have the end of the ramp there. And we used to have a metal ramp, which has been moved over, and now it's gone. All right, so that's the concrete after that they fixed these, boosting things. This demonstrates on the columns in front of the house. So this is on the old front porch, and they took off the column to see what was underneath that, and you can see there some red paint. Well, the paint specialist started digging through the layers of paint. they found 17 layers of paint on the front of the house. Since we decided that our period of significance, we're going to pick the year 1840, he looked to see, okay, what was the color in 1840? It was yellow. And that's why the front of the house, the Beecher era of the house, is now yellow. There you see a close-up of that. You see all the flakes. So it had been red at one point, it had been white, gray, all different shades. This picture, I want to draw attention to the giant crack there. That is the south, or the northwest, no, south. Gosh, I'm getting my southwest corner of the house. So that is Lyman Beecher's study. Can you tell what time this period is? See, historians like to date photos based on what's going on in the photo or what you can see, which is why AI for photos makes historians just crazy, because if you alter the photograph, then you can't use it as evidence anymore. So that is me, and that is my stepson videotaping me, because it is now the end of March 2020, and we are closed, so we are making videos about what's going on. My stepson right there is now a senior in high school. I know, he's so cute. Well, not anymore. So here's the front of the house. Here is the contractors meeting. Anybody who wanted to bid on the project came out and looked at the house and asked questions, etc. The contractor was selected for different phases. So we used, and this was Ohio History Connection that was selecting them, but they used different contractors for different phases. So we had one who was doing the outside, one that was doing the inside, several who were doing specialty things within the work. This is the outside of, you can see what used to be a window and it had been bricked over. That is now a window again. This was the underneath side of the porch. So as they took down the roof of the porch, you can see ghost lines of what had been there at a different time. So again, you're looking at evidence to show what had been there previously. So we knew that there had been a smaller porch underneath at one point. But again, that wasn't original to the Beecher era, and therefore the whole porch had to come down. So there is the porch destruction. There's the crew that did the porch destruction. And then we started looking at the gables across the top. Those are not federal style gables, 1833. They were a later addition in terms of making it look more Victorian in the 1870s and 80s. So those also needed to be removed. They're looking at specific things on the brick, and it's been so long that I don't remember exactly why he circled that section, but here we're in the lift, kind of looking at those cornices, and this is a close-up of that in terms of, so that's Chris Buchanan from the Ohio History Connection, and he's taking a plastic up there and really drawing out what the cornice looked like. So we had a record of that and preservation of that before, and you could see so you take off the current cornice, and then you can see what was underneath, and that's what he's drawing so that they can recreate what it looked like originally. This is paint stripping. That's a sciencey thing, right? When you have to strip paint off. And then you can see the different colors here. The bottom half has the paint stripper on it, and the top half doesn't have the paint stripper yet. That door up in the middle of nowhere, we had a fire escape at some point, but that really wasn't, that wasn't there clearly. That was an original window, and that has been returned into a window. We also had a bay window on 2 floors that was part of the 1908 renovation of the house. So do you think that bay window on 2 floors was very structurally sound? Not that much. So that also was taken off. And you can see here the stripping has gone around to the front of the house. So the original brick was red, but it has been painted multiple times over the course of the last 190 years. This is the inside of the bay window as they're trying to get it ready for taking that off. And then this is it. It was not brick. It was, a wooden structure. We've got some. So this is what the look of brick, basically, as they are, kind of cleaning and shoring it up. There was a lot of tuck pointing and other repair that needed to be done with the brick. Now we have the bay window, and it has been removed. Now, here's the interesting part that we were able to see with the bay window removal. And that is, we knew that there was a window in that room originally on that side. How do you know where the window was when you just have this big void? Well, on the left side, it's not 100% clear in the photograph, but on the left side, you see that the brick is very jagged along the edge. And on the right side, no, wait, I'm getting that wrong.
That's right.
One side
Right.
is straight, and one side is jagged. And so the straight side is where the original window was. And guess what? When they took down the interior part of that room, and they saw, because this is part of an L shape, and so directly across from the window that we found where it would have been was another window. So they were directly across the room from each other for that cross breeze. All right. They were working in the winter. So here we have more there was scaffolding, and then they had to cover up the scaffolding. Here they are looking at the brick. You can see now that the grout lines in terms of the mortar that they're putting in. See the work in action. And this part here, that see some of the bricks are new, so some of the bricks had to be repaired along the way. Here they're testing, sampling paint, see if they can get the right color. So they do small test samples before they paint the whole side of the house. Also with the foundation. Now, the next picture. You'd like to think that everything is done exactly like it was back in 1833, right? Well, sometimes you take a few shortcuts. So instead of 3 layers of brick for that whole bay window, they did use cinder block on the out layer of that. Or they used cinder block on the inner layer, and then, so that took up 2 courses, whereas then on the outer layer was the brick. But you don't know that now, do you? Well, you guys do, but most people don't know that. And then, of course, they had to do work on the openings into the basement. This, because it was a bay window and had been created, the bay window underneath, they created a coal chute, because remember, the bay window was put on in 1908, so what type of furnace did they have then? Coal. So that was a coal chute, so that had to be straightened out again, so it's a flat window. So this is kind of the crew that was making weekly updates in terms of the actual construction crew, and then the people from the Ohio History Connection, and one of our board members, our former board members, Ken Jones, who's an architect here in town, who was kind of helping oversee. He would ask the questions that I wouldn't know how to ask or what to ask. So he was good to be able to be at these weekly meetings to see the progress as well. What do you think that window? I just gave it away. What do you think that window used to be? It used to be a door. Yes. Again, you can see the straight lines on the brick underneath the window itself. That actually is that was the door into Lyman Beecher's study. As the president of the Lane Seminary, he would be able to invite faculty members and trustees and students directly into his study without disturbing the rest of the family. But during the Lane Seminary debate controversy, so to speak. I'm sure the rest of the family was listening at the door. There's a close-up of that, so you can see the straight lines there along the bottom and the sides. This is the yellow paint going. So they sampled the yellow paint. They had a couple samples. This is the one they selected. So now we have paint across the front of the house. We also have windows. We're going to get a little bit more detail into windows in a little bit, but notice that those front windows are two-part windows. We're going to come back to that story. All right, again, I'm going to have you date this. When is this picture taken? Cicada summer. So we know that this picture was taken in May or June of 2021. So we know that because we haven't altered our photographs. But time for roofing. Cedar shake roofing. I'm hoping it lasts a long time, but I don't know. This is the parlor mantle, and you can see they're starting their research work on it by leaving most of it intact, but taking off some pieces. Now they know that that is not the original look of the mantle and the fireplace in the parlor. We look at those tiles, you take those tiles off. Everybody used to ask me before, they're like, is that rookwood tile? And I'm like, I don't think so. I think it's, kind of styled like it, but it's not really rookwood. And so when we pulled them off, on the back, it says AEC. So I looked that up. It's American Encaustic Tile in Zanesville, Ohio. So that's where all the tile was made in 1908. So this is a picture of the parlor, so you can see both the fireplace that they're researching, kind of looking at the layers behind it, and then also on the right side of the fireplace itself, see those where there's kind of gashes in straight lines in the plaster, and that is, they believe that there were shelving units in that. And the paint layer on the bottom of that was kind of a pinkish color. And that was common back in the 1830s because when you put your porcelain, white and blue porcelain in front of that pink color, it really, makes it stand out. This is us packing up. We had to do lots of packing and unpacking, and we have another moving day on Monday as we bring some stuff back from storage. Here is more, this is the roofing guys, and I did not go out on the roof. I asked the roofing guy, hey, can you take a picture when you're out there and text it to me so that I have some records of that? No, I'm not going out on the roof. Yes. So that's where those pictures came from. But this is right outside the 1908 staircase window. So there's like a little portico over our visitor entrance. And so I was able to actually get a picture of him doing the roofing stuff. Let's see. Oh, I know why I included this. Anytime, you see what kind of machinery is there? It's like a digger. Anytime on a historic site that you have a digger or a shovel, you have to have an archaeologist on site. And this is, maybe it's not every place has to do that, but any Ohio History Connection place has to have an archaeologist on site just in case they find something. We still haven't found the privy. They haven't found anything in this particular area. That's along the north side of the house. They did find things later. We'll look at this. This is the inside of the front door. And again, you can see just, parts where they take stuff off. And so we were living in kind of a torn apart house for several years. Up in the top right corner, you can see where they took off the dental molding there. Because they knew that the dental molding wasn't original, so they took off part of it. Well, what's underneath this? Can we find any cool wallpaper? And then that's the out. Oops. Uh-oh. Happened again. Hang on. see if this works again.
There it goes.
There, it worked.
That's the outside of the front door. We had hard hats, because why not? You know, we did do hard hat tours for a number of a couple of years where we did hard hat tours, and we would take people behind the scenes and into the basement and into the attic and show them what was really going on. This is one of the guys from OHC who's the electrician who's putting lighting in front. We had kind of these temporary lights in front. New lighting for the front is being installed sometime this week, I think. They did run everything underground. So this was like just cords on the ground, but now everything is underground. Here is the whole north side. You can see the entire facade, but then all of the windows are boarded up. So they did paint them yellow, but overall, so it kind of blended in. But it was dark inside the house for quite a while. One of these old shock locks, which was the manufacturer name, and they're trying to, they're looking specifically to replace doors or door locks with this style of lock. Okay, so so again, Chris from Ohio History Connection. Then you see Rob and Kate. Rob actually started out he had been an independent contractor, but he worked for a lot of, he did work for a lot of different Ohio History Connection sites, including all of our work that was carpentry related. And now he's actually employed directly by the Ohio History Connection. But here they're pulling off a mantle and looking at the nails and looking at how it was attached to the wall. And then this is what you see after they pulled it off, and they're looking specifically at, what can we tell from the plaster and so forth. And there, Rob is looking for, this is a section where we know that doors have moved over time, so he's looking underneath where we think the door was, verifying that that's the case. So more of those types of looking. This is one of my favorite pictures. I know it doesn't look like much. This was on the back of the mantle in the parlor. So it was installed in 1908. And we think we have a litigious society today. But this says, caution, the material in which this mantle is made is thoroughly dry. To set it against wet or damp brickwork or otherwise exposed to dampness will cause the joints to open and the mantle to warp. Don't do it. So you have been cautioned. Don't set your mantle against wet plaster. This, guess it's not, yes, you can see. What are the little kind of stringy, fuzzy things that are coming out of the plaster? Anybody know? Oh, in most places in the United States, you would be right. But we live in Cincinnati, so we don't use horsehair in our plaster. What do we use? Hog's hair, pig's hair, pig hair plaster, yes. There's our hard hat stand so that we could offer these hard hat tours.
This is evaluated to find out that it was pig hair? How did you know? Like, did they take it to a lab and figure out, is this a horse or a pig, or is there a difference? How could they tell?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
But I'm sure that they knew somehow. All right, so this is looking at that, kind of next to the mantle in the parlor, so chipping away at where the shelves were attached. This is showing paint stripping on one of the mantles, and you can see the multiple layers of paint. Well, you can, all the way down at the bottom is a black layer of paint, and so many of the mantles, based on this evidence, have been painted black, or parts of them have been painted black today. You also have to set up your own little wood shop, because you just have to do that. This is getting ready to install new windows. So these are a couple of pictures of that. This is the north facade, so they had different windows, like measure, each window is slightly different, so they had to mark which window went in which spot because they were not interchangeable. This shows here, this is one of our staff offices. Yeah, I know, it's a little drab, not very natural light. Well, that's what it looked like, and this is what it turned into. So a window was installed. That was one of those windows that you could see on the outside that had been bricked over. All right, so again, we have the front of the house. Now, what do you notice about the front of the house? All the windows are boarded up. Throughout this whole process, we have tried to remain open as much as possible. Working around what the restoration people are doing. So at one point, and this was like the summer of 2022, we closed off several rooms of the house and said, okay, these rooms have active restoration going on, but here's a little window for you to see into it. So we condensed our space, but we're able to continue operations. We also had the kids from the Bush Recreation do their own little hard hat tour, so that was fun. This is the front hallway. You can see the archway there, and we're going to come back to archways here in a few minutes. But because the front was all boarded up, but we were still open, we had a lot of people calling, "Are you guys open?" Or "The place looks haunted," or something like that. So we actually got a banner and said, "Open during restoration," to put on the front lawn. All right, remember we have a lot of walls that have changed over time. So again, this particular wall was an interior wall that was brick, and when we moved the door back to its original location, we used some concrete block for some of it. But what do you notice above the door? There's a concrete lintel, because all of the brick arch lintels were determined to be not really as structurally sound as they needed to be. And so they had to be shored up in many cases. So all of the window and door openings needed to have that added. Now, of course, then they got plastered over, and so you're not going to see them now. But we were taking a 190-year-old building that didn't have these, concrete lintels and adding them so that we could remain structurally sound. And there's another example of one. And in some cases, I don't know if this is not really that great of a description of that, but in some cases, joists had to be sistered together and so forth as well, because there were some places where it didn't really extend all the way, or it was a rotten board or something, so that had to take place in a lot of areas as well. This picture shows them carrying one of the lintels into a room, getting ready to install it. And then this is the brick fireplace of one of the rooms. And again, Rob is there looking at, okay, so what did the firebox look like? How much brick overlay was there around the firebox? And the original flooring, that's all we're able to see, how big did it extend so that we could create the right sizes. And then this is, when you pull layers of plaster off and see the original lathe. All right. Now, look at the front now. And there is 3-part windows, not 2-part windows. We're going to actually take a deep dive into that just a little bit later, so I'm not going to go into it yet, but we'll see why those were changed from 2-part windows into 3-part windows. All of those doors that we found in the basement, so looking at the original doors and doing paint analysis and peeling back the layers of paint, it was determined that those original Beecher doors had been painted with a mahogany look finish. So it's not actual mahogany, because that would be too expensive, but you want it to look nice because you're the president of a college. So you paint mahogany, so faux graining. And the paint analysis person, she's an artisan in Walnut Hills named Chris Lemon, she was able to, determine the patterns of this wood graining, and so she was able to replicate it. So these are a couple of sample pieces that we had on display saying, okay, these are what the doors are going to look like in terms of the wood grain finish. I think that's just showing lintel again in the corner of the parlor, or the study, sorry. And then fireplace, so now the entire fire, all of the 1908 tile, American encaustic tile, has been stripped away, and you can see the original brick of the fireplace. And again, had to be propped up, so we did have a bricklayer who came in and kind of redid those brick arches for the fireplaces. And then remember, there was a lot of walls moved and doors moved, so one thing that you're always looking for is, how old of wallpaper can we find? And this is really an example of one of the oldest pieces of wallpaper that was found, because a whole wall had been moved. So when they moved the wall, they didn't strip the wallpaper from where they had moved it to. So when we took that wall arch, it had been opened up again, but there was still an archway there. And we took that archway off, then you could see an entire strip of wallpaper on both sides of the hallway. And it's this green cross pattern, and we're going to see that again here pretty soon too. So these are some samples that had been pulled off the wall of that. And then this is, so there was a we're going to look a little bit closely at the staircase as well, but this is looking from what used to be the upstairs hallway, but had originally been the staircase. So we're going to look at, how the staircase gets recreated, and we'll do that in just a little bit. This is the front stoop. The front stoop caused a lot of issues. Why? Because the Ohio History Connection restoration guy was really insistent that he thought that their stoop was sandstone. Well, it is really hard to get sandstone large enough to cover the entire front door area. So it's like a 4x9 piece of sandstone. And remember, it's COVID still. And there's all kinds of production delays. So first it had to come from a quarry in southern Ohio, and then it had to go to a place that cuts down to the right size in northern Ohio, and then it had to come here. So it took a long time to get our front stoop, but here are the pieces of it, and it has been installed properly. We also, found hinges on those doors. These are this is the same hinge, just both sides, so you can see an example of, they're using hardware that was from the 1830s throughout this process. This is our window into the restoration wall, and one of the things that we did was we had a window, and then we also had pictures of the house facade over time, so you could see over time what the front of the house had looked like. So just a little timeline of the house front, so to speak. This is, so all of the floors from all of the Beecher era rooms are the original pine floors. So they had always been, and never stained, never painted, so they had always been covered in some way because they're very well preserved. So all of the flooring is a white oak or white pine from Pennsylvania. That's our historic carpenter was able to figure that out. And this particular room is the only one where they had to replace about half of the flooring because something had warped or gone wrong with that particular set. And so this room, they did replace half of it. They were able to salvage some and then replace it with, basically it came from a barn in Warren County from the same time period. So it's still kind of the same time period, but this one is the only replaced floor. Everything else is the original pine floor, which has now been covered by replica historic carpets. But that's how it got preserved so long, is because it had always been covered by something. One of the fun things, really fun things about doing a restoration is when you find things in the wall, right? You find things in the ceiling. So we did find some artifacts as we were going. And in terms of those artifacts, you know, some of them are pop cans from the 1970s. And you're like, well, when you watch what contractors do and they leave their garbage around everywhere, you realize this is just the contractor's garbage from 1970. But you also find some really cool things. So through our research in terms of, you know, what the people that lived there during the Edgemont Inn period, we know that there were 12 apartments. We know that there were 19 people who lived there in 1940, because what happens every 10 years that you have a record of where people live? The census, yes. So census records show us who lived there in 1940. There was a mom, dad, 3 little kids as one of the families that lived in this boarding house. They lived in the attic space. We know this because 2 years later, there's a newspaper article that showed that 2 of the kids set a fire in the attic. It was put out, minimal damage, but that's how we know that they lived there. Well, when they took out the ceiling of the second floor, directly under the closet of the attic, they found some artifacts, like this Save This ticket that had a date of 1939. Or this cigarette container, which we know why the kids had matches. Or this child's shoe that had been completely petrified. I cringe to think what happened on the day that the little boy said, "Mom, I don't know where my shoe is." I don't know. So we actually took some of these found artifacts. There was also a radio tube and a Bosco milk amplifier top, which is basically Hershey's syrup with iron added to, you know, make your kids drink more milk. And these are the artifacts that were found that we put on display for our big public event back last year in 2023. So this is kind of what our tour route looked like during this time period, where we had rooms closed off and some rooms that were still being worked on. And, you know, we just had to make it work, because one thing that I was very adamant about is, like, I don't want to shut down for 3 years, because, you know, it'll be hard to come back from that. We want to continue to have visitors and get people excited and build momentum. And when people see what it looks like during this time period, then they'll be like, well, I want to come back when it's all finished. So we're hoping to see lots and lots of people back this summer and fall. Again, you can see the walls and ceiling. All right, you tell me, does that look like horsehair to you? I think that's pig hair. But that's one of the bigger examples of where it's like just really clumped up in the wall. All right, so here, they're looking at something on the floor, but I want to draw your attention to the window, or the pretend window in the back, and that is on that left, or on the right side there. That had been the window in the dining room that was directly across from the one that had been turned into a bay window. So when they pulled off the plaster, you know, the outline of where the window was exactly was there. Now, on the other side of that wall, which used to be outside, but in 1908, it became a beautiful paneled dining room. So, you know, you can't see it from the other side, but we're going to take that window opening and create the illusion of a window to the outside. We also had some more archaeologists on site. Uh-oh. All right. Well, we know what to do. Hang on. Okay. So, more archaeologists on site. This is actually on the piece of land that is just east of our parking lot. And again, they were trying to find interesting things, and they found a few things like an old cistern that was rather large. But again, when they opened it up, it was basically just modern trash in it. So we didn't find anything too exciting. So that has been documented as to where that is, but has been covered up again. Again, there's a stone wall that was found during this archaeology period. And really, they were just taking samplings from that lot to see if there was anything that needed to be investigated further. And then that will be a future project down the line. Here we have, so on the left with the red crosses, those are the wallpaper that was installed by a renovation group in 1979 and 80 called the CCY. They were basically just like making sure the house didn't fall down. And that was a at-risk teenage youth apprentice program for building trades that did that. So that's what the wallpaper had been. And then you can see some layers of wallpaper underneath that would have been early 20th century period. And then this is what used to be our back door. It is no longer a back door. It is now a window because that part of the house is being restored to 1940. And in 1940, that was a window. This is cool in terms of, that's Chris Lemon, our paint analysis and artist who's doing all of the doors and stuff. But she's actually sampling paint there on the side of the 1908 stairs. And this is a cool sciencey thing. I had no idea that this would be like this. But basically, she's got this, it's like this big, really. And you put it up against the side, you scrape away some paint, you put it up against the side of the wood, and then it's got an app to your phone, so it like magnifies it 10 times. So you can see, like, when you have this scraped away part, you can see the different layers of paint on the inside of the circle. So it's like the center is completely scraped, and then there's layers of paint till you get back to the outside of it. But that was a really interesting way to be able to see how many layers of paint had gone onto that 1908 piece. They also decided that we were going to move our utility lines, electric and water, or no, water was already underground, but our electric lines and phone lines underground. So this is them boring through the wall that is on our sidewalk and into the house. That's the actual boring machine that had to do that. It was quite an undertaking. And because the wall itself is an old wall, there were not many people who were willing to do that. And so Ohio History Connection was able to find someone that did perform that particular part of the contract work. And then this is our cabinet that has gone back into that space next to the parlor fireplace. So you can see that they took that color scheme and created a wooden cabinet with that pinkish color to it that was found on the plaster. This is the trench that they also dug a trench that took the HVAC. We also got a whole new HVAC system because before that, a couple years ago, we were using a 1950s boiler and steam heat. And we had giant air conditioning units, 4 of them right outside the back side of the house. So very unattractive. So through this, we got a high velocity heat and cool pump. I can't tell you the name of it, but basically all new HVAC. And instead of putting the units right behind the house again, they decided to put them out into the yard, which meant another trench was dug to be able to do that. Now, when they did that, what did we find? Another cistern. And this time, the cistern is located like under the corner of the house. You might say, huh? What? Well, this actually was the first addition to the house. So it was finished in 1833, but the very first addition was just like a 10-foot section onto the back to be able to create a back staircase. And so when they did that, they covered up this original cistern to be able to create that extra 10 feet of room on the back of the house. And that was done in 1840. And that's one of the reasons why our period of significance, which is a 20-year span, we honed in on the year 1840. So we now have documented where this cistern is, but it has now been covered up again so that it does not disturb the new HVAC trenching line. And you can see how close it is to the actual piping there. Okay. I should have had these in different order. Sorry. So this is the documentation of that back area where there was a window, there was a door, and now it is back to a window. So it's hard to see. So I will just go to the next slide. So a 1945 picture, photograph, again, those photographs, that 1945 photograph showed this area as a window. So we took out the door. Here's our bricklayer, our brick mason, who is recreating the bottom part of it so that it can now be a window. This is the upstairs mantle, and that is an original mantle to the house. Just different samples of wallpaper and linoleum and all kinds of things. This was a cool picture in terms of in the period earlier this year where they were doing some plaster work, they were finishing up the plaster work, and we were open for school groups at the same time. And so we have a homeschool group going on in the parlor, and on the 1908 staircase, we have one of the plaster guys doing the last bit of plastering there. And then our sneak peek tours took place on weekends during February, March, and April of this year. So we've been closed to the public for most of the time since October, but we did have a short period where we were doing sneak peeks on weekends, and this is, it was basically a PowerPoint presentation in one room, and then you got to look in all of the other rooms that were being worked on. All right, more plaster, more HVAC. This is one of those old doors, and you can see the original, the way that they were stripping down the paint from that. This is her in process. This is the first coat of the mahogany finish. That is one of the wood floors that was for one of our boarding house rooms that's been restored, and electrical panels that have been replaced. Brick on the front, they needed to do a little bit of tuck pointing again on the front, so that has been replaced and repaired. Some more floor repairs. This is where the windows are in process of being ready to be installed. And then this is that strip of wallpaper that was found that we have encased in plexiglass so that it is still available to see. That is the new window that will go out, not new, but the window that will look out onto the second floor of the two-story porch. Big reveal. Okay, so that is the window. That's the window opening. Oops, wrong one. That's the window opening. And that's what it looks like now. So we have a photograph, or not a photograph, but it's a computer-generated program, basically, that shows you what would have been out that window, and it's the second floor of the two-story porch. And then this is the paint, or not paint, but the floor. So you saw the way the floors were before. This is them in process of resanding and finishing them. So those are all of the, so in the Edgemont Inn areas, we took the 1908 floor, which has been there since 1908, and just refinished it because that is what would have been there in 1940. The start of furniture in the boarding house room. So for the Edgemont Inn period, we are restoring one room to tavern and one room to boarding house. And then that is the new drapery and wallpaper for the stair hallway. At the birthday party this year, Harriet was inspecting carpet. So that is the parlor carpet. And this is our carpet installer, whose very specialized task of installing 1800s carpet with little tiny nails. More mahogany staining on, that is now the door that I talked about in the study where the students would be able to come in. And then this is our finished wallpaper and floor carpet for the dining room and parlor areas. The dining room of the Beecher era is being repurposed, so it has the floor covering and wall covering like 1840, but it will be our museum shop. And then this is the floor covering for the study. We do not have wallpaper up for that room yet. This is our old entrance. So this is the side door where the top of the ramp, but it has been newly painted and with hardware from the 1940 time period. Got 1840, got 1940. Here you can see the archaeologist is there because they have a shovel. And then here's Harriet in her hard hat. So let's take a little bit closer look at the way a transformation would happen for 3 different areas. So I'm going to put all of the pictures time-lapsed together. So the study, and we're going to look at the wall of the study that looks into what used to be the porch and then was a hallway. So over time, it went from being, here's, they're investigating in the wall, here's where the door was. They know that based on where the straight line bricks are. Here is the new recreated door. We still had furniture in that room at that point. And then they created a larger opening because it was actually a double wide door because it matches the window on the other side of the room. So again, you get the cross breeze from the front of the house into the porch area. And then you can also see brick, and it was not very structural up there. You see the edge of the staircase that's going up to the second floor. And then the guy in the middle there is our structural engineer who's coming in to tell them, well, what do you need to do to shore this up? And basically they have another lintel above it and the recreated window, which now actually looks out onto what would have been the porch area. So by using this kind of illusion of, this used to be a window, so we're going to show you what would have been outside there. So even though on the other side of that wall is actually Edgemont Inn hallway, when you're standing in the Beecher study, you see the outside. Window configurations. So this is from the Historic Structures Report, and they knew that the windows had been altered over time based on these little mullion pieces that had been patched. So they said, well, how did that work? And really what happened was they took a 3-part window and turned it into a 2-part window by just interchanging the 2 side pieces. So they took the 2 side pieces and they went like this. And this is windows in process in the studio. And there you see their glazing of, so those are all 1832 replica windows. So there you have the 2-part window that they have created into a 3-part window. And the shutters was a big discussion. How are we going to do shutters? And we decided to do some of them closed and some of them open so you could see both ways that they would be. All right, my last little bit here is the Beecher staircase. And again, looking at the forensic evidence, so this was the hallway on the second floor. And they could see the difference in the weathering of the boards. And by looking at that, they knew that some of them had been exposed and some of them had had a carpet runner. And so the top of the stairs, there was a carpet runner that went along the stairs and then along the hallway there. And then this is pulling up the flooring there so that just the joists are exposed. These are the joists that were put in when that particular staircase was filled in 1908. And we used to be able to show people, okay, so this is where the staircase used to be, and here are the joists that they filled it in with. And then on the bottom floor, you could see the outline on the floor of where where the staircase was. Then Rob started looking at, and this is very geometry based, which is related to science, but you see here, he's looking at, well, where are the ghost lines of the staircase along the wall in the hallway? And he's looking at that. Here's kind of so you can see it in a different perspective. But then he puts up this plastic so that he's actually drawing on the plastic so that he can actually see the outline of where the staircase, this is like where the baseboard of the staircase went up. And it so happened that the ghost lines on the wall and the mathematics of how big the stairs were and where things were attached all matched up, and it basically was a 19-step staircase, the whole, when you look at all three sides of it, because it goes up, over, up. This is a student group that I'm showing that to. So now he's pulling up the joists completely, or pulling up the plywood over the joists so that you can expose that. So now we have an open hallway, and that part is the hall at the top. And now you see there's a railing there. Here's his plans for what he's going to do. Now, we do not have, the actual structure of, the railing and what the wainscoting and stuff like that. So what he did was he went and looked at an intact staircase over in Cleves from an 1830s house and modeled it after that. So here's the creation of the staircase, which was, like kind of a rough wood first, and then he put on all of the fancy parts of it. So you were able to use the staircase in its rough form first. And this is the plaster that is going up on the right side of that staircase. Again, here you can see where the window is at the landing. We already saw that. And then that was a door that was filled in. When they moved that wall, they also moved the door so that they had a doorway further out. Basically, they were creating 3 equally sized rooms in the front instead of 2 large rooms and 1 very small room. There is his model for the newel post and banister. And now we start to see the finished product. So that's the hallway at the top that looks down over the staircase. There you can see it's coming down. It's a cherry rail, and it's all one piece of cherry for that first flight up to the first landing. And then that's it with the wallpaper, which was installed 3 days ago. And that wallpaper is modeled after a copy of the wallpaper that was found. All right, my last one. Before, during, and after. I'm going to take 2 places. Southwest corner of the parlor and the parlor fireplace. So this is what the southwest corner of the parlor looked like before any of this started, when they were very early in the research. Here's what it looks like with the during period, and here's what it looks like now. And then you have the fireplace, which was this yellow fireplace from 1908. And this was the during. And this is what it looks like now. So, that is the end of the show. Sorry, I might have gone a little over time. So our grand reopening is next weekend. A historic housewarming. So Friday is Generations Unite, because for generations, the house has had people using their voices for truth. And so that is kind of the dignitaries and speeches and ribbon cutting day. That's on Friday morning, and then it'll be open house the rest of the day. On Saturday is a family day. We have a kids concert in the morning and kids activities throughout the day. And on Sunday is an artist's day. That is, bring your artistic ideas, come see the house, and then create something. We'll have an open mic or a viewing of any visual art that people do at 2:00. So I will entertain any questions if you have them. Yes. Jen, do you have the mic, or do you want the mic? Oh, it's up here.
Might be able to project. Yeah.
Well, but the people online won't be able to hear you,
Yeah,
so
that's right.
we would prefer using the mic.
So this one's maybe a little bit of a minor question, but you had mentioned getting all of the utilities run underground.
Yes.
Was that for more practical reasons, or was that to try to achieve some sort of historical appearance even on the outside of the house, like out to the street?
It was to achieve a more historic appearance, yes. And they went back and forth a little bit because they were like, well, there wouldn't have been any utility lines in 1840, but there would have been overhead lines in 1940. So they went back and forth a few times, but ultimately Ohio History Connection decided that they would rather have it underground so that it would, have the 1840 look of the outside. And I'm sure they had other reasons too, but so that was mainly it, though. Yes, but they did go back and forth on it a couple times before they made a final decision. Other questions? Over here. Yes, sir.
Okay, two things. First, total cost of renovation. And then two, have you been able to make any connection to the people that stayed at Edgemont?
Okay, so the first question, total cost. So all in terms of, the planning stages and the research stages and the creation is approximately $3.5 million. Most of that money has come through Ohio History Connection asks for capital budget funding from the state legislature, which is on a 2-year cycle. So we have gotten money from that, 3 different cycles of that. And then the remainder has been from different grants, including a large National Park Service grant. And some of the grants Ohio History Connection goes after and gets, and a few of the grants the Friends of Harriet Beecher Stowe House has gotten, and then we just passed that money over to the main pot of money at OHC. So $3.5 million all in. The next question in terms of residents of the boarding house, the Edgemont Inn period, we have not made any contact with any of them, but we have been actively researching them. And, Irene and Tom Bacon, who Irene was the proprietor, they didn't have any children. So we haven't, we don't have any connections to later generations. For the kids that started a fire, by the next year, they were living across the street in a different boarding house. Which they were living in the 1950 census. The 1950 census records have been released recently. So we saw that. And then we did trace them. A couple of the kids had moved to California at some point, and then we haven't been able to figure out anything since then. So, we are a small staff. 1 full-time person. We now have 4 part-time people. But, we each are doing a lot of different things, and we just don't have as much time for research as we would love to. But, we're still actively working on it, so to speak. Any other questions? Yes, in the back.
Have you found any connection to the Underground Railroad with the house at all?
So Harriet has had some indirect connections with the Underground Railroad. It was not an Underground Railroad house, hence there was no reason for tunnels there. But and part of that is, Lyman Beecher was such a prominent clergyman that would have been there would not have been a good idea, so to speak. But there are some indirect connections. So, for example, you've heard of the Rankin family out in Ripley, Ohio? They were documented Underground Railroad conductors. They have this little house on the top of the hill. You put a light in the window there, you can see it in Kentucky, and people knew that was a safe haven. Well, the Rankins and the Beechers and the Stowes are all friends because they're all Presbyterian ministers. And so Harriet knows the Rankins and hears stories from them, including the story of a woman named Eliza who crossed the frozen Ohio River with her baby, jumping from ice to ice. And Harriet takes that true story and makes it an episode in Uncle Tom's Cabin. And then there are some other indirect connections. So for, another couple of examples, Levi and Catherine Coffin lived close by in what used to be, their house was in Walnut Hills. Now it's under Interstate 71. But that was, she made some connections with them and kind of modeled a couple of her characters in a Quaker village after the Coffins. And because Harriet is a very busy person. She has 7 kids. She is writing, to help make ends meet because the long story short, Blaine Seminary doesn't make a whole lot of money. And her husband is one of the professors there. She comes out with her father and then she gets married to another professor at the Lane Seminary. So, they have six kids while they live in Cincinnati and then another when they move to Maine. So she's got kids and house and writing, and she always hires kitchen help. Well, at one point she thought it was a free black woman working for her. Turns out she didn't have any papers, and the slaveholder was in town looking for her. And so Harriet had her husband and brother take the woman to John Van Zant's house in Glendale. So she knew what was going on, and she was able to maneuver and help people as needed, but she wasn't directly participating in the Underground Railroad. Anyone else? Well, you guys have been great. Thank you for listening to all my history tonight. If you do want to see the renovated house, like I said, next weekend is all kind of open house, and we're doing admissions through donations next weekend. And then our regular tour schedule will resume on Thursday, July 25th. We're open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Thursday through Saturday, 10 to 4, and Sundays, 12 to 4. We start tours on the hour, and we're working diligently at getting our online ticketing system set up. So you can come as a walk-in, or you can go to our website in another day or two and go ahead and pre-buy your tickets for the time that you want. So thank you so much for inviting me tonight.
Thank you, Christina, for going outside your comfort zone. Thank you all for coming. Be sure to follow Science on Tap on Facebook or Meetup. You can also find all of our previous events on Radio Artifact's YouTube channel. Shout out to our amazing partners at Radio Artifact for their help in producing Science on Tap, as well as Urban Artifact for hosting us. Next month's event will be August 7th. We're back to the first Wednesday of the month. We're going to be talking about, does knowledge make us better people? Does more information and more understanding give us better ethics and make us good people? So it's going to be an interesting conversation. We're partnering again with UC's Public Engagement with Science Department to put that on. So that'll be an interesting conversation, especially in the current political climate.
Harriet would have some things to say about that.
Yeah. You're welcome to come join the conversation.
Here?
Yes. Yep.
On what day?
First Wednesday of the month,
Okay.
August 7th.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And then I'm planning the rest of the programs for the remainder of the year. We're getting some exciting program lined up for you. Thank you all for being here and have a great night.
But I still love you, and I thought that you should know. Over and over again and may not be your fault, but I've been told I need to find someone to blame. Latchkey kids keep coming up through the seams in the space of a father's dreams. Yeah, I'm still